the next chapter. We're talking about economic efficiency, government price setting, and taxes. So we'll be working with supply and demand like we did the past 2 chapters, looking at different situations, supply and demand, and the effects of different, say, policies. So first, we'll start with talking about consumer surplus and producer surplus. These are ideas based on mutually beneficial exchange and people's subjective value of goods. Because of those 2 ideas, consumers and producers are both made better off. So we'll explore how they're both made better off. Next, we'll look at the efficiency of competitive markets. So how a competitive market in equilibrium, how it's efficient, and how Adam Smith's invisible hand moves the market towards a competitive equilibrium. Next, we'll look at government intervention in the market, so how price floors and price ceilings work, what the effects of those are, how they move us away from equilibrium. And then finally, we'll look at the economic effect of taxes. Just a simple idea of how targeted taxes on certain products impacts the market for those products. So we won't be looking at like how the income tax affects like people's decision making or anything. It'll be how does the tax on alcohol impact the booze people buy. Actually, there was a really cool paper written in one of the top economic journals a couple weeks ago about the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board, about how they tax booze. Because they tax booze like the same like percentage, like across the board, whether it's like real cheap or real expensive. So it actually subsidizes people that buy really cheap alcohol. But they end up with like lower taxes overall than people that buy more expensive alcohol. So if your parents drink and they drink nicer stuff, they're paying a little extra, so you end up paying a little bit less for your cheap booze. And the only reason they use Pennsylvania only, because we're like the only state that you can only buy booze in state-run liquor stores. Like you go to like California, you can go to like, I don't know, like Sam's Club and like get like a crate of booze. Weir's not from Pennsylvania. Okay, so a decent number of people from, normal states. When I was in Salt Lake City for work, they took us out to a restaurant the one night, and they're like, sorry, like alcohol laws here are like pretty strict. And then I was like, well, we're from Pennsylvania, so we're used to it's the same exact thing here. Although they're not like, their bars are even set up weird. Okay, so in equilibrium, remember in a competitive market where there's a large number of buyers and sellers, that there's pressure on them, on sellers to meet consumer needs as best as possible. The price is going to adjust so that the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So every consumer is going to be willing to pay the market price. Or every consumer that is willing to pay the market price is going to be able to buy as much as they desire. And then every firm can sell as much as they want at that market price. Now, some consumers are going to be willing to pay more than what they actually end up paying. So, again, this is because of subjective value, that they value it more than the price it's being sold at. But because of equilibrium, it's at that certain price to maximize, the firm's profit. They're getting a deal, so to speak. So when there's voluntary exchange, we'd expect that some people get even more value from a good than what they have to give up to get it. And the same for firms, that they would rather have the money that they're getting than the product that they're giving up. So an example of consumer surplus is an Uber on a Friday night. Last Friday night in DC, I was in DC and I was staying in Arlington in a hotel, and my phone was on like 2% when I called my Uber, and it was extremely risky. My phone almost died. It died like right after I got in the car with the dude. Had I had to walk home or I don't know if taxis still run in DC, at least that late at night. If I would have had to walk home to the hotel, that would have taken me like 3 hours. So that $15 Uber was probably worth $40 to me at the time. I would have paid a disgusting amount of money to make sure I got home, especially with 2% left on my battery. Other situations, I used to commute from Arlington to DC for work. I would Uber pool for about $2.50 to about $3.25. And I lived right by a metro stop, but my work was like 6 blocks from a metro stop. In that case, I didn't get a ton of consumer surplus from taking the Uber because I could have, taken the metro, and it had been pretty simple. And metro was like $2.50, $2.25. So it was a little bit cheaper. Wasn't too much less, convenient. So I wasn't getting a ton of consumer surplus there. But the very end of the night when you need to make it back to your place, the other option's walking, a lot more consumer surplus. Oops. There we go.
There may be one. Okay, it's $500, you have no choice of carrier, the battery can't hold a charge, and the reception isn't very— Shut up and take my money!
This is it. When you really want something, and like Fry has a ton of consumer surplus there. He was more than willing to pay all that money for the newest iPhone. Even though it was a lot of money, he still derived more value from it. So he ended up making himself better off.
Use the example of him with sardines. Have you ever seen that episode?
Oh my God. You see, I signed up for this email thing for lists of examples and stuff from the news, and that's the one they use. I didn't even think of that. The sardine was perfect. So for those of you who don't watch Futurama, Fry was
From the 2000s.
yeah, like a normal, well, pretty slow, not like average dude from 2000 who ends up getting frozen and is unfrozen in the future. And in the one episode, do you want to explain it?
Yeah, in the one episode, Fry finds out that he had $4 in his old account that turned into $1 billion. And then
Compound interest over 1,000
He
years.
just starts spending it crazily, and then there's a can of sardines that he wants. They're all extinct at this point. And another antagonist of the show needs them for her business, so she starts outbidding him. But then Fry spends pretty much all of his money just to get a can of sardines.
She wants to use sardines as an energy source.
Yeah.
Supposed to be some kind of crazy nuclear power or something. He wants it because it tastes good and it reminds him of his simple life in the year 2000. But he spent all that money for something that most people didn't think was worth anything. He got a ton of consumer surplus from him because it was something near and dear to his heart. All right. Who here has Disney Plus? All right, now who here pays for Disney Plus? Okay, so a few people. I have Disney Plus, but I don't pay for Disney Plus. My friend has Disney Plus. But how much would you be willing to pay for it?
I split it between 6 friends, so I want to pay for it if they didn't.
So you pay $1 a piece, a month. Anyone else who doesn't have it, who would be willing to pay money for it?
I'm pretty sure the middle way is something I would want to watch. Just the overall, the amount of stuff that comes with it that incurs the price. It's just it's
Couldn't you buy it for 1 month and then binge watch Mandalorian and then cancel the subscription? And then only pay $6.99 to watch it?
That's dangerous, That's gonna hurt my bank account.
You can just find it somewhere for free to stream. Not that I encourage that, but it's possible.
I think that I was getting ads for bundling. You could bundle ESPN and Plus or
Yeah, you
Disney
can.
Plus and Hulu for $100.
So they're reinventing cable.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Wasn't that what they said is basically happening with all these streaming services?
Yeah,
Like
every channel has their own service now. CBS has one, and
Really?
yeah. So yeah, you're gonna end up having to buy all of them, and then end up you just have cable again with extra steps. Do I have the? Okay, so someone did a survey, and more than 25% of the consumers that they surveyed were willing to pay more than $10 a month for Disney Plus, which costs like $7 a month. So 25% of consumers, let's assume that these are people that have Disney Plus that are willing to pay more, not just people who just say it. That's 25% of consumers who are getting at least $3 in consumer surplus per month from Disney Plus. They value it even more than what they're being charged for it, so they're being made even better off. And then 69% of consumers of their target age range indicated a willingness to pay something for the new streaming service. So 69% of consumers said they would pay for it, even if they're going in with a couple of their friends, paying at a much lower cost. Kind of surprising, 69% said that they would be willing to, considering how many people just get it for free from friends and family. Do you think they're ever going to be able to figure out a way to stop people from doing that?
There were too many people.
You think so?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I feel like it's too much ill will from consumers.
Well, especially when, my parents are 3 hours away from me, and, they're the ones that pay for it, but I use it up here at college. So, technically, we're on a family plan, so you can't, cut me off from it, but, so, how would you regulate it?
Yeah, how would you stop someone from, how would you stop, you from, giving your friend your login?
Yeah. Well, why does
That's
it
what I
matter?
don't
They're still
know.
giving money.
Yeah, but I mean, they could get more money. Oh, that's something I wonder about. They're going to figure out how to do that. Okay, another consumer surplus example. So you walk into a store and you see a Blu-ray for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. It's in a big bin. There's no price tag on it, so you don't know how much it costs. So how much would you be willing to pay for it? I don't know how much Blu-rays go for, so I just guessed 25. Is that a normal price for Blu-rays? 20? Damn, all right, well, that ruins it. All right. 15, boom. So if you're a big Star Wars fan, you don't have it on Blu-ray yet, and you have a Blu-ray player. Say you pick it up and you're like, man, I need to get this. I need to finally bite the bullet and buy it. I'd pay up to $30 for it. You walk up to the register and they say it's $15. Again, because you're willing to pay much more than this $15, you're getting consumer surplus for it. Hopefully all these corny examples are helping drive home the point before we break it down, economists who don't do anything in the real world would do. So economists use the idea of surplus to refer to the benefit that people derive from engaging in market transactions. Consumer surplus is a difference between the highest price a consumer is willing to pay for a good and the actual price that the consumer pays. Producer surplus is the difference between the lowest price a firm would be willing to accept for a good or service and the price it actually receives. So both consumers and producers are benefiting, above the price that they're selling the good at. So let's break it down with an example for chai tea. You can tell the examples I pick and the examples that the textbook picks. So if you have 4 people that are interested in buying a cup of tea, I actually brought a laser pointer to work so I can stand over there and do this. I keep bringing a break with 2 class. So over here we have the 4 consumers and the highest price that they're going to be willing to pay. So Teresa's willing to pay $6 for tea. Maybe she's really tired and needs some caffeine. Tom's willing to pay $5, Terry $4, Tim $3. So each one is less and less willing to pay for the tea. You're getting less and less benefit from this tea. So if the price of tea was for $7, that's what it's charged, how many people would buy tea in this example? None. No one values it for $7. But if it was $6, Teresa would be willing to pay for it. She'd get exactly zero consumer surplus because she's being charged exactly what she'd be willing to pay for. Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead. So, how much benefit each tea consumer gets in this market is, it depends on the price and on their marginal benefit. So the benefit they get from that next cup of tea compared to the price of that next cup of tea. So if the price is low, obviously a lot more consumers are going to benefit. If the price is high, few if any are going to actually benefit. And this demand curve, again, this isn't market demand, this is just a few people, that's why it looks so weird. It's downward sloping, the demand curve, but it's like pink for like each one. So Teresa, you want to pay 6, so that's her demand here for 1. Tom, guy who's at $5, so that's in here. Terry, and so on. Again, the quantity increases from 1 to 2 here for Tom because Teresa and Tom are both going to be willing to buy. I hate how they design these so I can't ask like questions sometimes. But the price of tea is $3.50 per cup. In this case, Tom, Teresa, and Terry are all going to buy cups of tea. So right here at $3.50, so just draw a line across for the market price. Let's see, there's Teresa, there's Tom, and there's Terry, all above that. So they'll all be willing to pay. Teresa's willing to pay $6 because it's worth $6 for her. So if she only has to pay $3.50 for it, she gets a net benefit of $2.50. So what she values it minus what she paid for it. So this area A right here represents how much consumer surplus she's getting. You want to do it mathematically. $6 minus $3.50 is $2.50. The quantity goes from 0 to 1, so times 1, like the area of a rectangle, is $2.50. So with $3.50 per cup, how much consumer surplus is Tom getting if he's willing to pay $5? So you take his value, how much he values it for, $5 minus $3.50. Yeah, so he's getting $1.50 of consumer surplus. He was more than willing to trade $5 for it. He only had to give up $3.50 for it. And then Terry was willing to pay $4 for it. She only got charged $3.50, so she gets 50 cents consumer surplus. So if all 4 of these people are the entire tea market, the consumer surplus in this case would be the sum of these areas, so the sum of A, B, and C, or the sum of $2.50, $1.50, and 50 cents. So the consumer surplus can be thought of as the area below the demand curve that is also above the price that consumers have to pay. Might be a little tricky looking at it here, but when we see the market supply and demand curve, the full like normal supply and demand curve, see it much more clearly. So now if the price falls to $3, so they drop it by 50 cents, Teresa, Tom, and Terry each gain 50 cents of consumer surplus. And because it's 50 cents cheaper, they get 50 cents more benefit from it. Tim is going to be indifferent between buying the cup and not buying the cup. His consumer surplus is 0 because he's being charged exactly what he's willing to pay for it. So in this case, with the lower price, the consumer surplus is going to remain the area below the demand curve and above the price. The same as before. Just, now with a different price. So here's a more typical market demand curve, the smooth downward sloping demand curve. So we're looking at a market with a lot of consumers, and still this tea market. Consumer surplus is the same thing. It's below the demand curve up to the price. So the price here is $2. Everything between $2 top of the demand curve is going to be the area of consumer surplus. So in this case, if the price is $2, quantity demanded is 15,000. The consumer surplus is going to be the area of that triangle. It's not a geometry class, so I'm not going to make you guys memorize or try to remember the formula for the area of a triangle, or try to compute that. But the idea is that the consumer surplus is the area between the price and the demand curve. So I wish I had drawn units here, but say this is $8 right here. This first person is willing to pay $8 for tea, and they're only being charged $2. What's their consumer surplus? $6. As you go along the demand curve, people value the tea less and less, so the consumer surplus is shrinking, all the way down to this point where the consumer surplus is 0, and they're indifferent between buying the tea and keeping the money. Okay, so let's think about the internet. Who here has the internet at home? I had to check to see if anyone didn't. I mean, this is a pretty rural area.
3 megabytes a second.
Well, they still have like family video places like around here, because it's tough to stream in these in remote areas where you don't have data.
Satellite internet's a big thing around here too.
Really?
I refuse not doing it. I'd stick to my 3 megabytes a second before I got satellite.
Yeah, wouldn't it go out in bad weather like satellite TV?
Yeah.
Which is when you want to have the internet and when you want to have cable?
We were thinking about getting HughesNet. So I went on Reddit and looked at all this stuff about HughesNet. And it's just an entire page of hundreds of people just roasting HughesNet. Don't ever use HughesNet, all this crazy stuff. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not doing that.
When I moved down to DC, I was so pumped to not have to use Comcast anymore. I could go, because there's three providers down there. There's Comcast, there's Verizon, and then there's some local DC one. I forget their name. So I had all the choices. So we went and we compared the reviews of all of them, and Comcast had the highest reviews.
That's what I was gonna say.
Comcast had the highest reviews.
I was trying.
It was 2.1, or no, 2.4 to 2.1 to 2.0.
I was trying to get Comcast at my house, but they won't come out. They sent me a whole letter, basically said, "Screw you, I'm not coming out here." Because it would cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars to run lines out to where I live.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it for like 3 houses. Yeah, no.
Yeah. Can you imagine the price you have to pay to make up for that?
Yeah. Yeah, they have it in Asheville, but not today, so no one's out there.
So having access to internet connection, obviously beneficial for consumers, makes our lives a lot better. Besides the stuff it could help you with your business, or help you take your work home or whatever. But there's a lot of entertainment stuff, streaming, surfing, all that. So there's a ton of different benefits. But we can measure just how beneficial internet is for people by estimating the consumer surplus derived in the market. So in order to do this, you need to estimate the demand curve for broadband internet service, and you'd have to know the price of broadband internet service. Now, how easy is it to find a demand curve, an estimated demand curve? from what we talked about before. It's pretty difficult, if not impossible, to actually, create one in real time for a market. Any of you guys, I guess it's probably too old now, but remember Freakonomics? And that was really big. All right, so there were these two economists that write about weird topics using economics, and it became really popular. Might have been like 10 years ago now. One dude looked at the effect of legalized abortion on crime rates and found evidence that legalizing abortion actually lowered crime rates. So it was legalized in like the 70s, and the crime rate peaked in like the early 90s, right? And then started plummeting. So the people who get abortions, tend to be single mothers, tend to be young. People who tend to commit crimes, young men like 18, 20 years old, raised in a single household, lower income, young parents. So you're reducing the population of people who tend to commit crimes. That was his theory. And he did a bunch of other the two guys did a bunch of other weird stuff like that. But the one guy wrote a textbook, and for the demand curve, he put in some kind of joke that we can't estimate a demand, or we don't have any demand curves there. So he didn't even include one in the example of a real life one, and then went back to the theoretical ones we have. You don't know who that guy is, you probably didn't care about that. So now these two economists, Shane Greenstein and Ryan McDevitt, estimated a demand curve for internet. So in the year 2006, the average price for internet service was $36 a month. They estimated demand curve based on, the different quantities supplied and demanded in regional markets across the country. So they actually went through and estimated the area under that triangle. So every triangle is half times the base times the height. So there were 47 million subscribers per month. So that's the base. And the height is $73.89 minus 36. They estimated that 73.89 was where that demand curve crossed the y-axis. So they ended up estimating that consumers derived a consumer surplus of $890.4 million per month. So every month, this is how much more value consumers get from the internet than what they had to pay for it. Which, when you think of all the terrible reviews of internet providers, kind of funny that people get this much value from it. I almost wonder if they could charge an extra $5 a month and just provide better customer service. You ever see the jokes that it's cheaper to get hired at Comcast and go through the whole training procedure and then fix the problem yourself than it is to just have them come to your house and fix it? All right, so next let's look at elasticity in consumer surplus, how goods with different elasticity of demand have different levels of consumer surplus. So we'll compare two products, Fight Milk and Wolf Cola. So Fight Milk has a small fan base, very sensitive to price because there's a lot of alternative supplements out there that provide the same things that Fight Milk does for people. On the other hand, Wolf Cola has a very distinct taste, and in many markets, it's one of the few cola options available, so there's much less elastic demand. So you've got one product that's inelastic, one product that is elastic. So on the left, we have Fight Milk, very elastic demand, very sensitive to price, because there's a number of substitutes for them. So the consumer surplus is the area between the demand curve here and between the price. So it's this little triangle right there. Now for Wolf Cola, because there's not a lot of substitutes for it, it is much more inelastic demand curve. So if the price increases substantially, from here to here, you're not going to see a lot of demand being lost because there's a few other places to go. People don't mind the price increase so much. In this case, the consumer surplus, the area between the demand curve and the price is much greater. The basic idea, people are very sensitive to price. If price is going to impact the amount that they're going to buy, they have less consumer surplus than in the case where people are not as sensitive to price, where they're willing to pay a lot more. And that's basically what I say here. When elasticity is high, consumers don't value the good much more than what's being sold for in equilibrium. So right here for the fight milk, the people who value it the highest in this market still aren't valuing it that much more than the price. Whereas on the other hand, the more inelastic good, people up here at the top of the demand curve are willing to pay much more than the price. So for the inelastic good, consumers are willing to pay very much more, and they're having a much higher consumer surplus. Does this concept, this idea make sense to you guys? Just an opportunity to see where like elasticity actually matters, besides an excuse to make you guys do problems. All right, with that, let's before we get into our producer surplus, let's take a quick break. It's been a while. Let's do a question from each side of the room. Just kill some time.
How was your weekend?
Weekend was good. I went down to a conference in DC to try to recruit students to join our center as like fellows, to like do research for us. Or
How'd that go?
not a lot of students were interested. Yeah, unfortunately. But I did talk to a few people that were like presenting there. One guy gave a cool talk that I want to try to bring to campus here. He was like super engaging and interesting. You guys don't have a lot of economists here that are interesting and engaging. How about you guys on the other side?
I was in trouble.
Couldn't think of anything else. Yeah, besides that, it was good. I have a bunch of friends still in DC, so I got to see them Friday night.
Didn't you see an ex-NFL brother that weekend?
So that was the previous weekend.
I heard this thing is like the top of like that division and the worst NFL team will switch every year.
I saw a meme saying like people should do that, or like they should do that. Are they actually considering it?
I don't think, but I think that would be.
I would love that.
Yeah.
You guys been watching it?
DC defended pretty good.
I know.
They're like the best team.
Cardinal Jones is like
Yeah.
still a good quarterback. He's enormous too.
He can throw a football like 90 yards.
I mean, who was the Penn State quarterback? Was it McGloin who's playing? Like last week he was like 3 for like 15 or something. Like that's how I expected. I thought all the quarterbacks would be terrible. But at least Jones can like
They're either
toss
like
the ball around.
they were either the decent backups in the NFL or just awful.
Yeah.
Some of the players can't.
Yeah, it's hard to get like. I feel like the defensive backs and linebackers are like the strength of the XFL, like probably like the highest quality position. So it's like really tough for any offenses to get going. But Philly's talking about getting a team. They like registered like a domain name or something, like a trademark. So it may not be like the AFL and just like fold after a year.
Well, that was like the big problem was they weren't even like paying their players. And like that came out like halfway through the season last year, so that's why they folded.
Well, I heard that they like started before the XFL did. The AFL, and like once the XFL started, they lost a lot of their like backing. I don't know if that's true or not though. That was like one of those things you like hear on Facebook and you don't look into it at all. Like about how you're not supposed to vaccinate your kids.
Obviously.
Someone shared a meme on Facebook, so now I'm not going to.
Instead, you're supposed to put like potatoes in the socks.
Is that actually a thing?
That's actually a thing.
My dad just found out that anti-vaxxing is a thing,
Really?
and he said he thought the anti-vaxxers thought that vaccines cause osmosis. So my sister and I are, like keep like mentioning it like casually like in front of him, trying to get him to like think it's real and say it to like someone outside the family. Haven't got him yet. I guess we can jump back into it. Okay, talking for an hour and 15 minutes is hard, all right?
Talking for any amount of time in a day, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. Like, literally just like going constantly, like my throat was not used to it. It's still not used to it. All right. So, producer surplus. Same basic idea as consumer surplus, but for the firms producing the goods. So you can think of it pretty much the same way. There's a difference between the lowest price a firm would accept for a good or service and the price it actually receives. So the lowest price a firm would accept for a good or service is the marginal cost of producing that good or service. So if the cost of producing the next pizza for whatever the new pizza place in town is, what's it called? Dimitri's? Is it like a chain or is it like a standalone place?
I think it's still on.
I used to have a restaurant in town again. I mean, unless you have like an hour to wait for the food from the LPG.
Well, I don't know why they didn't open it up in the football season. They opened it up in spring.
Yeah. I think you get a lot more customers on game day.
Yeah.
But if it costs Dimitri's $5 to make that next pizza, the lowest price they'd be willing to accept for it is $5. They're not going to accept a lower money and lose money on it. So Heavenly Tea is a very small producer of chai tea, so this is the same market as before. The first cup of tea costs them $1.25 to make. The next cup of tea costs $1.50 to make. Next one $1.75, and the fourth cup $2.25. As it gets more expensive, the more of any product you make. That's why we have the upward sloping supply curve. You need to bid away resources from other uses, you're going to have to pay a little bit more as you get more. So in that first cup of tea, it costs them $1.25. If they're selling it at $2, they're getting 75 cents of producer surplus. They're willing to sell it at $1.25. They're selling it for $2. The next cup, they're willing to sell for $1.50. That's their marginal cost. They're selling it for $2, so that gives them 50 cents of consumers or producer surplus. Third cup, 25 cents. And that last cup, they will not sell because it costs them more to produce it than they would make from selling it. So then the total amount of producer surplus, go back to the last one, is the area total producer surplus for heavily T is this area, A, B, and C combined. So the area beneath the price and above the supply curve. So if you want to look at a normal supply curve, makes more sense than the steps going up. So it's below that price. Let's say it's a $2 price again. Below that and above the supply curve. The total area of that is the total producer surplus from this firm. Oh no, this is just in the market for T. Yeah, so it's area below the price of $2, above the supply curve. Again, you can calculate it doing the area thing. If you have the price and the quantity. That's really all they have there? So the consumer surplus measures the net benefit to consumers from participating in the market rather than the total benefit. So the total benefit received by the consumers is literally the amount of utility they get from a good, the amount of enjoyment they get from it. That's total benefit. But you have to, for the consumer surplus, that measures the total benefit minus the amount they have to pay for those goods or services. So that's why it's between the demand curve and the price, not like the demand curve and zero. But same idea, producer surplus is the net benefit received by producers from participating in the market. So the total amount of utility that they get from participating in the market would not include the cost of producing the goods or service. They have to take that total amount of utility minus the cost of producing the good or service. Then you get the consumer producer surplus. I really wish they had a supply and demand curve together showing the producer's consumer surpluses. But basic idea is that the total benefit would be from the price of $2 over to the quantity demanded all the way down to zero. So both of these triangles. But the consumer surplus doesn't just care about the total benefit, they care about the total benefit minus the cost of producing. And this is the benefit above, above what firms or what individuals like consumers are paying and above the cost of producing for the firms. Okay. Yeah, there's enough time we can at least start this. The efficiency of competitive markets. So we can think about the efficiency of markets in two ways. It's efficient when all trades take place where the marginal benefit exceeds the marginal cost and no other trades can take place, making both parties better off. And we can also think of it as efficient if it maximizes the sum of consumer and producer surpluses. So the total net benefit to consumers and to firms. This idea is economic surplus, or the total surplus of both sides of the market combined. Typically when we talk about markets being efficient, we think of it in terms of marginal benefit equals marginal cost. So the first description of efficiency, but we also can talk about it using the idea of producer and consumer surplus. So the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost only at the competitive equilibrium. Anywhere else, marginal benefit and marginal cost are not equal to each other. So right here, if the quantity is too low for the market right here, we have, say the equilibrium is 15,000 cups, and the equilibrium price is $2. If we're only selling 14,000 cups per day, the marginal benefit of the next cup is $2.20, and the marginal cost is $1.80. In this case, output is inefficiently low. In this case, people can derive more benefit, $2.20, than it would cost firms to produce $1.80. So because there's more value that can be created, firms will be willing to produce more. Firms will continue to produce until the marginal benefit equals the marginal cost. So they're going to move up the supply curve. The quantity increases. They're going to move down the demand curve all the way until that equilibrium point. At that point, the firm can't make, they won't earn a profit from producing more goods. At that point, the marginal cost is going to exceed the marginal benefit. So you're moving from 14,000 cups to 15,000 cups, and then go past it. At this point, the cost, marginal cost on this curve is going to be greater than the marginal benefit on that curve. So say the marginal cost ends up being $2.01, and the marginal benefit is $1.99. Obviously, how many of you guys are going to sell a product that you're not making your money back on? Anyone? No.
What if it was like a perishable item?
There are some instances, and we'll talk about them later, where you do actually want to sell at a loss because that's the best way to get your money back.
Yeah.
Same thing with, stores selling like last season's clothes.
It's better to get something for it than
Yeah, it's either throw it out or get like half the value for it. In that case, you get half the value for it. Although, in that case, you could argue the demand curve is shift because it's last season. So it's taste and preference. Yeah. But it's still, in some cases, it does make sense to sell at a loss. But that's when it's already produced, not when you're making the decision to produce or not. So in this case, we're talking about where firms are still deciding whether or not they want to produce the next unit. So if the quantity produces too high, then the cost of producers of that last unit is greater than the value that consumers derive from it. So if you're all the way over here at 16,000 units, marginal cost is $2.20 up here. The marginal benefit is only $1.80. So consumers aren't going to be willing to pay that extra, they're not going to be willing to pay $2 for something they only get $1.80 of benefit from. And in that case, firms wouldn't want to sell it at $2 at that equilibrium price because it costs them $2.20 to make it. So in this case, it's inefficient to produce this many goods because you're not going to be able to sell the additional goods you make, especially for the price that it would cost to break even at. So only at competitive equilibrium, in this case where price is $2 and the quantity is 15,000, right at that point where supply and demand curves cross, that's when the last unit valued by producers is going to be valued by the same amount by consumers. Hence, economic efficiency. Okay. Yeah, it's almost 9 o'clock. I don't know if I can get through the producer and consumer surplus idea of competitive equilibrium yet, so we'll stop here. Do you guys have any questions before we leave?